Hey everyone, welcome to session 180 of the Behavioral Observations podcast. This is a fun and way overdue Patreon member hangout featuring Dr. Merrill Winston, who longtime listeners will know has been on the show several times. In the times in which he's been on the show, we've stayed in touch, and we end up talking pretty frequently about all sorts of things, behavior analysis, and so I thought it would be a good idea to bring him on the hangout and have folks asking questions directly and things along those lines. So in this particular conversation, we talked about how Greg Hanley influenced Merrill's departure from his previous employer, how he wanted to do more than be considered as just the restraint seclusion guru, his new enterprise, Winston Behavioral Solutions, and much, much more. However, we spent the most amount of time discussing what makes a good behavior plan good, and conversely, what makes some of them, not pass muster. So I think anyone who's out there writing behavior plans will hopefully get a lot out of this episode. Merrill just has a good way of making complex things really simple, and I think there's a lot of messages here that will resonate with the audience. This session started out as an interview, but we quickly transitioned to Q&A with the attendees. And it was just a really enjoyable conversation amongst several experienced behavior analysts. So it turned out to be kind of like sharing ideas amongst the attendees more than anything else. So it's the kind of conversation I think you'll probably overhear in a conference bar or something like that, perhaps minus the alcohol. So if you don't listen to anything else, I'd like you to listen to the hilarious story that Merrill closes the show with. So I won't really tease it any more than that, but even if you have to fast forward all the way to the end to check it out, it's worth doing. It's really funny. So there is a little bit of, mild potty language here and there. So if you've got tender ears listening along with you, just be on the lookout for that. Nothing too bad, mostly PG, but I know there are listeners who listen while they're taking their kids to school and things like that. So just want to give you all a heads up on that. I also want to give you a heads up that this podcast is brought to you by the Secret Agent Society. It's a small group program that helps kids 8 to 12 years old crack the code of emotions and friendships through an animated secret agent theme. It also includes a sophisticated digital health platform that allows you to deliver group interventions face-to-face or with telehealth or a combination of formats. So go to the show notes for this episode where we'll send you a link to demo this platform. And if you mention this podcast when you reach out to them and you decide to become a Secret Agent Society provider, they will waive your establishment fee, which is worth about $500. We're also brought to you by the rapidly upcoming 2022 Verbal Behavior Conference. The 2022 event will be taking place both in person and virtually over April 7th and 8th. It'll be going down in Austin, Texas. And if you can't make it there, head on over to behaviorlive.com/VBC to learn how you can tune in from afar. The conference will feature Vince Carbone, Francesca Dell'Espinosa, Tamara Casper, Pat McGreevy, Sarah Lashago, Kevin Luzinski, Kelly Rich, David Roth, Mark Sundberg, and Hank Schlinger. I will be there on site to host the 2022 panel discussion. Again, this is my third time doing it, but the first time in person. So if you're interested in learning more, again, go over to behaviorlive.com/VBC for more details. And if you do attend the in-person conference, please be sure to say hello. We're also brought to you by institutional patron tier GreenSpace Behavioral Technology. GreenSpace Behavior offers cutting-edge supervisor coaching, performance, and competency-based trainings, as well as organizational supports for new BCBAs and trainees. Find out how you can optimize your supervision practices, improve clinical outcomes, and increase employee satisfaction over at greenspacebehavior.com. And last but not least, I'd be, remiss to not mention that I'm recording this introduction on the 6th year anniversary of the podcast, and I really never say this enough, but I really just want to thank everyone who tunes into the show, who shares it with their friends, who subjects their students and trainees to listen to specific episodes, for folks who support the show, either by sharing it with other people, subscribing on Patreon, or purchasing CEUs, and certainly all the guests who have made this show happen. So it's been a whirlwind. This show has been a game changer for me personally and professionally, and it never would have happened if no one listened to it. So I thank you, the listener, as well as everyone else who's involved in the production of the episode of the podcast. So again, I don't say this enough, but just really heartfelt thanks. And I look forward to podcasting for the next 6 years and maybe more. So having said all that, without further delay, let's get to this fun Patreon hangout with Dr. Merrill Winston.
Welcome to the Behavioral Observations Podcast, stimulating talk for today's behavior analysts. Now here's your host, Matt Sikoria.
All right, according to our friends at Zoom, we are now recording. So, Merrill Winston, thank you for joining us this evening. This is the Behavioral Observations Podcast members and Patreon group hangout. We're going to do something a little, I don't know if it's different or not. It's been a while since we've done these, so I'm a bit out of sync myself. My plan this evening was to ask a couple of questions to stimulate some discussion, and then have some Q&A from the attendees here. So that is, I think, how I'd like to pursue it. I'm open to ideas, but and what I want to do also is to publish this as a podcast, so as well, so that we can consider this a taping in front of a live studio audience, except there's no studio. The studio is the interwebs, as it were. Through the power of Zoom, we're accomplishing this. So,
will this be for CE?
Is this for CEs? No,
Okay.
I'm not planning on it.
Oh, good. I can be that much more irresponsible then.
Oh, totally. So,
yeah, just checking.
Yeah, we're going to be completely irresponsible with a few caveats that I'll mention.
I'm going to make up way more than usual in that case.
Yeah, here we go. So as some folks know, longtime listeners will know that you've been on the podcast a couple of times in the past. Those were some. There was episode 79 and 87, if I'm not mistaken, where we talked about mass shootings and restraint and some of the other work that you're known for. And we've kept in touch through that time. And so we, as folks might not know, you and I talk, pretty regularly. So what I thought we'd do, it'd be like one of our just kind of normal phone conversations. The only difference is, Merrill, is that a couple of things. We can't swear.
Okay.
We can't talk about guitars.
Okay.
And we can't make fun of people. So This might be a short conversation, actually, because that's usually what we do. We can wrap this pretty quickly, I guess, given those parameters. But anyway, I kid, of course. But anyway, so here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to start off, because I know there's been a bunch of changes. Before we hit record, you talked about separating from PCA. You've got a new consultancy going and things like that. So why don't you start us off by taking a few minutes to just catch us up on what's new with Merrill?
Sure. Well, yeah, I left PCMA in October, mostly just because, I'm going to blame Hanley, because I wanted things my way. And so, I heard about kids getting things their way, and I'm like, man, that sounds awesome. So, I was not granted any omnibus man at work. So I was like, I think I'm going to do my own thing. I've been doing this for 20 years. And I mean, the other thing is it's nice to have a specialty, but what was kind of bringing me down is I'd get messages on Facebook and they go like, hey, Merrill, I heard like a kid got killed in a school and I immediately thought of you. And I'm like, thank you. So yeah, after a while, it's like I'm glad to have expertise in the area because it's sorely needed. But by the same token, I didn't want to like just go down in history as only Mr. Restraint. And because I have a couple other tricks in my bag other than that.
Well, we're going to get to those, but yeah. So so if I were to kind of paraphrase what I'm hearing here is that you did the ACT values exercise where you imagined your eulogy or something like that, right? And so here lies Merrill.
Just summarize something I said with ACT.
Hey, if the shoe fits. So long story short, you wanted to be known for more than you wanted to do other things.
Diversify a little bit, and I do have interest in other things, like why acquisition doesn't happen and why behavior never changes. And I mean, a lot of it was I would get a lot of questions about somebody's hitting us. How should we hold them differently? And I'm like, I go, we can talk about that, but I'd really like to talk about how long he's been hitting you and why it's still happening, because I can help you come up with a better way to hold them that's probably safe. Okay. But there's a larger looming issue I'm kind of concerned about. And I started getting more and more calls like that, where I was less and less concerned about telling them how to hold somebody and more concerned about, why are you holding them and why does this keep going on? And they never really had good answers. And so, I wanted to also do something where I helped a lot of people at PCMA, but only people who received the services from PCMA. Like they'd call me and I'd help them clinically because I was working for the company, and BCBAs would call me from other places about a kiddo they're working with, and I never charge them. I would usually just take a few minutes and I would do it. But I thought it would also be nice to be able to help all kinds of people other people I want to help who aren't using that system or aren't using any system or aren't really worried about a crisis. They have other concerns. So so that was kind of a lot of the motivation for doing other stuff. So what I'm doing now is mostly the things that I love the most, which is doing presentations, doing expert witnessing, doing individual case consultations, and just basically trying to help other behavior analysts be better behavior analysts. I'm not doing the clinical work myself, but I'm trying to help other people do better clinical work at this point in my career. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm focusing on now. Yeah.
And it's Winston Behavioral Solutions, right?
Correct, which I realized sounded reasonable at the time, and it was easy to find the domain. But there's no less than 879 behavioral solutions companies. But at least there's only one Winston Behavioral Solutions, so that's fine. But
there's only one Merrill Winston.
There you go. Thankfully, yes. But anyway, yeah. So that's what's going on now, and so. But it's nice because I can do now presentations for organizations that couldn't get me before because I was busy training people on how to restrain people. And so, my time is like really freed up now. So, So anyway, started doing more of that, and I'm going to take more expert witness cases as well, not just crisis management ones, also ones that are like due process in the schools where no one can agree and no one's making progress, and it's becoming litigious, but not really helping the kid yet. Yeah. And I'd like to get involved in doing some more of that too, because it's nice to be able to resolve some of those things. But anyway, yeah, that's kind of where we are now.
Cool. Well, one of the things that you and I have spoken about, and I know you've done some presentations on, is the topic of writing behavior plans. And so let's see, where is it? Oh yeah. So the title of one of your talks is "Why Most Behavior Plans Suck." Oh, but not yours. I'm sure yours is really great. So
yeah, which is a long title, and probably I don't know if I'd get that past ABAI or something like it, which is not. I never present there anyway. But you'll note I said most. That's right. That's technically only 51%, but it's actually much larger than that, I'm sure. But
well, I try not to use words like always and all and never. So yeah, I think it's good to avoid those.
I mean, I've read some good ones, so I know it can't be all. So yeah,
Yeah. What made me think of having this conversation is, and you and I have talked about, you and I have talked about this, I think either on the phone or through messengers. I was consulting on a case recently, and there was a behavior plan written by another clinician, and the plan itself was something like 15 pages long. And it was based off an FBA that was about the same length. And I'm not going to get into the details, of course, for obvious reasons and whatnot. And I'm also not mentioning this to poke fun at anybody. We're all products of our learning histories. And so someone taught that behavior analyst to write in that style. But I didn't, me personally, I didn't find these documents useful for the lay people who are implementing them. And it just made me think of, okay, how do we communicate what we want people? How do we communicate complicated things in a way that's simple, that people can kind of execute on them in such a way that can be helpful to the individuals that we serve? So you and I kind of talked about that a little bit, and it occurred to me like this would just be a fun conversation to share, because I think there's other people would benefit from it. So where I'd like to start is, and where did you, so that was kind of my, I guess, inspiration for thinking about having this discussion. It was around the same time where I started seeing you present on this as well. So what motivated you to create a whole presentation around this topic? What were you trying to convey? What was your message? And, what was the why behind it, I guess, is where I'd like to begin with.
Well, I'll give you I guess the motivation for this particular one. Well, it came from a few places, but the most recent place was a really, as a favor to somebody, I got asked, would I just look at a behavior plan? Okay. Just to kind of like say, as a behavior analyst who's read a bunch of them and used to be the head of behavior program review committees and had been on other people's committees, et cetera, would I look at one and say, does this look reasonable? Even though I'm not saying it's not going to work or it will work, but does it look reasonable? I said, yeah, I can do that. I've done that a lot. I've spent a lot of time doing that. So I looked at it, and sure enough, and like after like the first like paragraph, I'm like, oh, I think this is going to suck. And then like later on, I'm like, yeah, it definitely sucks. And then a little further, I was like, I think I'm going to do a detailed description for my own purposes of how and why it sucks. And so when I started doing that, I was like, this is going to be a presentation, because I was so angry. And by the way, and again, there are no bad boys. I get that. Everybody's got a baby in their back seat. This person had contingencies operating on them. However, this person was a board certified PhD level behavior analyst. And this plan was a piece of garbage, but I didn't curse because we're not supposed to curse, but I didn't say garbage when I first saw it. Okay. But it was worthless. And not only was it worthless, it was probably, and this is why I wouldn't name anybody, it was most likely damaging. See, worthless means it would have a neutral effect. This most likely would have a damaging effect, right? That's how kind of bad and off the mark it was, and reflected that they didn't really understand this person at all. So that's that kind of thing. And I'm like, well, if we can get a plan this bad from a person who has those kinds of credentials, then what does it look like kind of across the board? And also, we all know this. We all know there's physicians out there who are quacks. There's attorneys out there who are awful. Just because you're a professional doesn't mean you're highly competent. You could be a minimally competent professional. It's a normal bell-shaped distribution for all kinds of professions. So, the point being, it's not like all I think sometimes as behavior analysts, we think that because we're behavior analysts, we understand behavior so well, just all the plans should just be awesome all the time. And they should be really good, and they should hit the mark, and they should communicate well. They don't. They're awful. And there's all kinds of contingencies operating on behavior analysts in the field, other than the lofty ethical clinical goals. All kinds of contingencies.
So let's get into that. Why do you think it's hard for folks to write cogent, clear, simple plans?
I think there's a few things. One is you said this a little while ago. How can we easily explain, break down complicated things? I'm going to ask another question. How can we stop complicating what is fundamentally simple things? Okay. Because that's what we do. I spent years in graduate school learning how to write flowery. And what happened was, and this is part of the motivation for doing the presentation as well, I've done presentations like this before. I did them 23 years ago. The Department of Justice came in and looked at all our behavior plans, which I told people to write and I looked at and I approved. And the Department of Justice said, in particular, Nirbhay Singh, and I disagreed with him on a lot of things, and I still do, but he was right on this one. He said, your plans are too complicated. Your staff aren't going to be able to run them. They've got too many words. The sentences are too long. They're written on a grade level that's much too high. They need to be written on a 6th grade level, which is kind of how he talked. Pretty much exactly. But anyway, he was right. The average newspaper is written on a 6th grade level, except for a few big words here and there that they have to use. That's how they're written. We are used to writing for our professors, and not writing a certain way gets punished. So that's kind of part of what happened. And I had to spend a lot of time learning how to write simply without losing the power of what we are trying to do. It can be done, but it takes some time. That's all. To unlearn what you did and find the easy, simple words that can say fairly accurately what you need people to do. Because what behavior plans are, they are more or less a series of if-then statements. If you see him do this, you do this. If he didn't do that, you don't do that. If he did do this, you do this. And then there are conditional discriminations. If he does this, do this, but only if he did this first. Well, that's a little bit more difficult, right? But this is what we're doing. We're giving people instructions, if-then statements. We are setting up conditional discriminations. Celia was just talking about rule-governed behavior earlier. A lot of the things we're giving are rules. Right? If he does this, then you do this, and this will happen. Sometimes the rules specify consequences. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they only specify antecedents. Kind of all call them rules. But anyway, no matter what we're talking about, no matter how complex the behavioral phenomena, they can all be broken down to real time. If he does this action, you do this action. That would be the machine language of the behavior plan, like the zeros and the ones in computer language, right? The assembler language and the different various computer languages, that would be more like our nomenclature and our definitions and the words we use and the concepts we use, because our concepts represent a whole bunch of little bits of behavior in zeros and ones at a higher level. And so what we're trying to do is break down for people in behavior plans. In my mind, how I'm thinking about it is, I'm trying to get these high-level concepts down to the zeros and the ones for you, the person who's doing it, because all they need is the zeros and the ones. This happens, do this. This happens, do that. They are technicians. They don't need to know how it works. They need to know what to do when. That's kind of what we need to get in there. Mm-hmm. And I know no one explained it to me when I was a young behavior analyst, what we need to do. I mean, this is the kind of stuff Skinner would have to sit down and write something about and think about. And he probably already did. He wrote about so many things about what we have to do as the behavioral engineer and what somebody has to do if they want to, make us a behavioral engineer, and how we have to break things down for the people who are going to be changing behavior. Right. It was one of the points I made in my talk. And it's one of the things I say to mom and dad and to the staff, that although I'm going to figure out a lot of things and I might see a lot of things you guys don't see, I'm not fixing your kid. I can't fix your kid. You're going to fix your kid. You're going to fix your student. You get all the glory. I'm just going to help. Right. I'm just going to help. But if this kid gets better, you made him better, because that's how it works. I can't be here to do this. So anyway, since they are the ones who really are the agents of behavior change, what we say to them has to be so clear and so easy to do. We need them. We need them to do this. Our clients need them.
Hey everyone, I just want to take a quick break here and let you know about the Secret Agent Society Small Group Program. Are you looking to improve the efficiency of your services with group options for children and families without jeopardizing program fidelity or outcomes? The Secret Agent Society Small Group Program has the formula to do just that. Originally launched in 2009, this revolutionary espionage-themed intervention package provides services a fun, effective, and flexible group service option that children and families search for. With the Secret Agent Society, you can streamline waitlists into group services, expand to reach underserved families or geographic regions, automate assessment, family communication, and data reporting, and offer flexible combinations of face-to-face or telehealth formats. Backed by over 17 publications and with more on the way, the integrated one-stop shop Secret Agent Society software is a hub for the clinician, family, and school to all connect around the child. The program features an animated secret agent computer game and many more award-winning resources to equip SAS facilitators with an all-in-one structured curriculum for teaching social skills, emotion recognition, emotion regulation, and problem-solving skill areas. The Secret Agent Society Small Group Program is truly an innovative way to deliver engaging group services for children ages 8 through 12 with identified social and emotional goals. So to learn more, go to sst-institute.net to learn more and book a live demo for your team and managers. And don't forget to tell them that I sent you to take advantage of the special podcast promo to have your establishment fee waived, which will save you in the area of $500 to $800. So again, to learn more about this, go to sst-institute.net or simply go to the show notes for this episode where we'll have links waiting there for you. All right, let's get back to this conversation with Merrill. I want to stay with the motivation piece for a second in terms of why we encounter some of the plans that we've both talked about here. You said something about writing for our professors, and I think there's that. And I want to know what you think about this. I know sometimes
or committee,
I've certainly thought about this before. So so I'm not here on a soapbox because I've written my share of plans that probably I would like to have another shot at for sure. So I know in my head sometimes I'm thinking like, well, what if another behavior analyst sees this? They might think I'm stupid. And, so yeah, I'm going to be very transparent with everyone here tonight. That sometimes I should, I'm more aware that I do it now, that so I don't try to like pepper the document with jargon and things like that. I think I've learned to undo that impulse, but I want to know what you think about that. If there's that kind of like, what will they think about me if someone thinks this is, not sufficiently sophisticated or what have you?
Yeah, I think that they are trying to impress the other professionals in most instances, maybe even themselves. I really don't know. But I think there's some of that goes around. The other thing is, I firmly believe that some people that do not have a really firmly rooted grasp of the basic concepts, they throw the words out because they know they're supposed to be there and they just kind of stick them in there and they really don't understand what's going on. And it's reflected a lot of times in the plan. So a lot of times, here's why I say it this way. A lot of people hide behind the language because they don't understand the basic concept well enough to explain it to a 10-year-old. And there's a saying, like, if you can't explain it to a 10-year-old, you may not understand it well enough yourself. Now, of course, you're not going to explain like complex phenomena to a 10-year-old so that they'll understand it at the level that a college professor understands it. But if you can't break the basics down so a 10-year-old could say it back and have a basic understanding of the concept, then maybe you don't understand the concept. If all you can do is explain your big words with other big words, you don't understand the phenomena. That's what I'm going to say.
Jump in briefly.
Yeah.
I'll tell you,
Oh, I'm enjoying it so incredibly much. I can't even tell you. So I've been a special ed teacher for 30 years. I only became a behavior analyst in 2016. I'm so
sorry to hear that. You were doing so well too.
But
Kate, let me just jump in here real quick. Just introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Kay Otten. I don't know. I probably joined the Behavior Observations podcast tour during the pandemic, Matt. It was right at the beginning of the pandemic, and seriously. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have to read journals. I can listen to podcasts and like real people. This is awesome.
The silver lining of COVID, I suppose.
But I think I kind of got into behavior to this whole world at the right time, because people were doing podcasts and doing these types of things and like relating to people versus, I mean, it's hard for me to even get a journal article as a special educator, right? But I absolutely agree with what you're saying. 110% is, I especially resonated, Matt, with what you said about, I'm afraid somebody's going to read this and think that I'm not smart. And I was like, it seems like we're violating our ethics all over. Like, we're supposed to be using everyday language, but then when we use everyday language, we're self-conscious that I'm not using the big words. So I read something by Polly not very long ago where he was saying like positive and negative reinforcement. Why can't we say add and subtract versus, and somebody said, well, then you're just dumbing down the information. I'm like, you're not dumbing down anything. You're making it accessible to the masses. So I love this. This is exactly what I'm thinking. And it's like reinforcing that I'm in the right field, because I think the more we're having these conversations about making it accessible, that's what we're supposed to do. Plan for generalization. So I think I came in at the right time because I don't have that long history with the community.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it is.
Yeah. My home is in special ed, which those two worlds are the same and they're also so very different. So you're reinforcing everything I'm thinking, which I appreciate. So just wanted to say that I'm really enjoying this a lot.
Oh, good.
Very cool. You mentioned Polly Gavoni, and I would say that he is one of the more successful communicators in our field, and he's actually doing really great work bringing behavioral concepts and behavioral science to outside the realm of ASD, DD, the stuff that we are kind of known for and more typically gravitate.
Yeah, and Paulie actually took over my old position at PCMA, and he'll do very well there. And so he can bring his flair to that as well.
Very cool, very cool. Kay, thank you for that. I appreciate that. All right, so we've talked about perhaps some of the reasons why people struggle with writing behavior plans, and I think more generally, sometimes it's difficult just to kind of. This is more so, I suppose, in communicating the functional nature of problem behavior. Sometimes I know that's something I struggle to put those thoughts to paper, if you will. Sometimes it takes me a long time to write like a functional behavioral assessment because I really obsess over every word to make sure, because it's so easy to come off judgmental and so easy for people to take things the wrong way that I probably spend just an embarrassing amount of time over writing it and whatnot.
Can I ask a quick question?
As long as you introduce yourself first.
Oh, no. I'm Emily Kearney. I'm in Portland, Oregon. This is Moira, my assistant.
The last time I saw her, she was in the Behavioral Observations onesie.
I know. Yeah, she's.
Oh my gosh.
She's 3 on Sunday, so she's
grown
out a little bit.
It was in Emily's tummy.
Yeah, you used to be in my tummy. She's like, and then the doctor pulled me out. I'm like, yep, that's how it happened.
That's an anatomically incorrect, but that'll be corrected later.
So one thing I was curious about was just what would, obviously I'm jumping in partway into the conversation, but who the audience members are for the behavior plans, right? Because that can really affect how you write it or how much time you spend on it or what language you're using. Yeah. So depending on if you're in a school district and you're writing one that a para is going to implement versus other BCBAs. So I'm just curious so like Matt, when you were saying you spent a lot of time on it, who's going to be reading it?
Let me take a stab at that first, and I'd like to hear Merrill's thoughts on it. But I guess my response is I would spend more time obsessing over the written product when it's a non-technical audience. So if I'm writing something that a parent is going to review, or a professional from another discipline is going to review, or a teacher or a paraprofessional is going to implement, it would take me longer to craft the language in such a way to be accessible, to undo a lot of the stuff in my head, if you will. So that would be my take on that.
I'll give you mine. There's a couple things. One is I encourage people to write different versions. So the one version is maybe the version you have to bring to the LRC, and it's going to be viewed by your peers and then a super peer or something. That's one thing. When it comes down to what the people need who are going to implement the plan, that should be written so anyone could just pick it up almost and just go, okay, this makes sense. All right, I can do this. It should be like that for anybody else. Like a human rights committee or a local review committee. We used to call them behavior program review committees. But yeah, it's a committee of your peers. Usually like districts have them. Like in Florida, different districts has a chairperson, and everybody from all the different provider agencies bring their behavior plans to them, et cetera. So they look at those kinds of things. So what I suggest is that we used to do at the institution where the Department of Justice came in and said our programs were too flowery and wordy and verbose. We had one that was for approval, right? That was very technical. And then we had a pullout, which was only what staff needed. And one part was like a narrative. And I do this in the presentation. It's just like, Johnny is a guy that once in a while, he really likes juice. And sometimes there isn't juice. And when he hears there isn't juice, he might hurt somebody. So what we're going to do is we're going to teach him what to do when there's no juice, right? That's like the overview, right? And that's getting at the problem behavior, the target behavior, a replacement behavior. It's already alluding to all that. Like he does this, he gets this way, he loves this, and then this happens and does this, and we're going to encourage have him do this instead, like we do, right? And there's like a little story at the top, just like that, and then it flows from there. And I guarantee you, a 10-year-old could pick that up and do it, right? Like we made it that simple. Granted, you can't always do that. I mean, if somebody is teaching someone their first man. We even did that one, quite frankly, if you're working with a person who doesn't have many skills. That's a tougher one, right? Because you need some technical skills to do that, or to do language acquisition or something that you have to be very, very careful and make very fine discriminations. But for a lot of the things that we do, that's not really necessary. Anybody could do that. But if it's not laid out properly, then, it becomes difficult to do. But I think the other reason to do this is this: when you're writing a plan, I didn't start thinking about these kinds of issues until I started doing legal cases. I'm thinking whenever I write a report or a recommendation or something like that, I write it in a way that any jury could read it and understand my rationale, what I'm saying, why I'm recommending what I'm recommending. Even if it's like based on function and it's access, I'll still explain it like, this is an access function. What that means is, he's doing it to get this, just like you might go to the store to blank. And it says it just like that. And there's nothing in our code that says we can't explain things simply after we say them. And I do it that way because I'm thinking in my mind, if this ever ends up in court, I want people to be so clear on what I said and that I knew what I was saying, right? So I'm trying to write everything that way so that anybody could read it and from another discipline, legally, and they get what we're doing. But a lot of people, I think, a lot of disciplines do this, by the way. We hide things, we shroud things in our jargon to be mysterious so that people can't call us out on when we didn't do things right, or when we didn't explain things well enough to them because we jargoned it up, that kind of stuff, which it makes it easier to hide what you're doing if you jargon it up. You got to admit, because people stop questioning you because they don't want to get into the details of what your jargon means. It's off-putting. But anyway, yeah, those are my thoughts on it.
Hey, everybody. I want to take just another quick break here to remind you that the Verbal Behavior Conference is coming up right around the corner. It's taking place on April 7th and 8th in Austin, Texas, and virtually. So whether you're in Austin or Boston or I don't know, I can't think of anything else that rhymes with those two cities. But anyway, long story short, you can attend from afar. And you just need to go to behaviorlive.com/VBC to learn more. So there's lots of amazing speakers at this year's event. They've been gracious enough to invite me to chair the speakers panel. I'm really excited to do that for the first time in person. It'll be my first time in going to Texas as well. I'm very excited about that too. If you end up going there, please be sure to say hello. But I think there's going to be something here for everyone who's interested in language and cognition. So go to behaviorlive.com/VBC to learn more, or simply go to the show notes for this episode and I'll have a link waiting there for you. I hope to see you there. All right, let's get back to this conversation with Merrill. You mentioned something that set up a good segue. And that was, you said, use the words laid out. So in Merrill's world, what is the layout? What is the template of a behavior plan that you would prefer to see? I get the piece about having the narrative before the actual procedural elements, but for the real literal types in the audience who kind of want to create a mental picture of what the document looks like, what would give us the rundown here?
That's right. The funding source does influence what people do. And I think, but they also use that as a shield because they go like, well, I had to do the FBA this way. I only have 10 hours to do it. If you knew it was a complex case and you only have 10 hours, then somebody's obligated to tell somebody else, this is not enough time to do this. I can't do a proper job. That's how these things are supposed to work. When you see that the service you're being asked to provide will not help because you couldn't do what you needed to do, there's some responsibility there, I think. But a lot of people just say they do this. What are you going to do? I only have 10 hours. Oh, I see. So you
just do another 10 hours unpaid.
Right.
Emily coming in with the realist perspective.
Well, yeah, but I mean, what a lot of people do is they're just putting placeholders in file cabinets in public schools because I've seen them before, and they're good placeholders, and they check the box, and that's about it. And because people don't understand what boxes should have been checked in the first place, and so nobody asks questions, and then nothing gets done. Yeah. But I'm sorry. The question you just asked before, Matt. Oh, yeah. What does it look like?
What is the layout?
I'll tell you the way we used to do it at the Community of Landmark, where it was the institution where the Department of Justice came in. We had the overview. Like, this is Johnny. This is what he's like. This is his likes and dislikes. Just a little picture of him, right? This is the problem. And by the way, we didn't list out 57. He hits, he spits, he bites, he claws, he twists and tweaks. We don't need all that. We just say like the premier things. He becomes aggressive. Everybody knows what he does. They're all scratched up. It's not really necessary to go through the litany of stuff that he knows how to do. Okay. Everybody's painfully aware. Okay. Literally painfully aware. So, we have that. This is him. This is the problem, right? Here's what he's doing now. Here's what we need him to do instead. So it covers in that the replacement behavior, right? And then it even covers, here's what we're going to teach him. Here's the data you're going to get for us. And here's what it's going to look like. You're going to write down when he does ABC. That's it. We even say that. So that's all in the intro. And then we go into the sections. The first section is kind of like, we already explained why he did what he did. The first section would be like prevention. So this would be all the any antecedent stuff. Okay. So, if you notice him doing this, say, hey, buddy, how's it going? And, always make sure and say that if nobody's interacting with them. And, we'd have something like that. So just a few simple things. Then we'd have another section, what to do if the behavior happens, right? What in very simple things, do this, do this, do this. What to do if you think it's about to happen. It was just simple things like that. Like what to do if it goes into a crisis. Basically very simple stuff like that. And there were just different sections like that for the staff. Because for the staff, what they really need to know most is, what should you be doing all the time when there's no problem? What should you do when you see the problem coming? It might be another section, right? It's something about to happen. What to do when you couldn't prevent it and it's already happening? Things like that. What to do when it's over? And those would be like most of the sections in there. And it'd be simple. And the thing is, they don't really need, from my perspective, they don't really need to understand he does this to access this. What they really, you can explain it to them. But what's the most important is, do you do in real time what you need to do? Even if you didn't agree, we'd love for them to agree with and understand what we're doing. But just for the sake of argument, just plain Mr. Spock, it wouldn't matter if they didn't care about the kid, didn't like the kid, didn't agree with what you said. But if they promised to do exactly what it says on paper, it'll work. Doesn't matter. They don't have to. Remember Morpheus talking to Neo? And he's just like, well, what if we don't, I don't believe what you believe. My beliefs do not require you to believe it. This is what he says. I don't need them to believe what I said. I don't need them to agree with what I said. I do need them to do what I wrote and to do what they saw me do, if you're using behavioral skills training, right? And do what I just told them was correct that they just did, right? We do need them to do that and to keep doing it no matter what. And if they do that, we'll get behavior change no matter what they're thinking. So, that is kind of important. So it's better if they agree with us. Sure. Absolutely. Why wouldn't it be? But if you have giant reinforcement for staff to do exactly what you say, it really doesn't matter what they think about the program. Will you do it?
I like what you said, Merrill, about having them, just like when you do this. So they're trying to get access to tangible, just like when you go to the store. So I find we all have functions of behavior. And I think sometimes people
we all work the same.
Right. We are doing a functional behavioral assessment because this individual has specific, I think we all have functions on behavior. So we can make that comparison of, when do you want escape? When do you want attention? When do you want access to tangible? When do you want memory?
That's everything I do with staff to get them on board with me. Yeah. All I try to show people is what they already know to be true, but are not looking at.
Yep. And then they can be like, oh, okay. I'm like, it's just the human condition.
Yes. They all know all of this to be true. But what we do is we separate them from this truth by throwing jargon in their face. So they've been on the planet the same number of years we have. They understand it to be true. They just can't see it because of other things they've been told and other worries and other biases. Yep. But if we explain it properly, as long as we're not the ones who are off base. So like if we're out of touch with the universe and we're looking at behavior and we are completely out of touch with what's going on and we're just heavily rule bound, like Celia, you were talking about, like rules are great if you give rules to orient, but when you give too many restrictive rules to people without good judgment, they never develop judgment. They become rule bound and they write horrible pieces of crap programs. I can say crap, right? But they write that. And one of the reasons they write it is they've been taught, follow this rule. And if you break it, you're in trouble. Yeah. And that's part of our problem, is not that rules are bad. You can't get anywhere without some, but eat some general at first. And then as you gain skills and gain judgment, you have to let the rules down a little bit. You have to loosen them a little bit. Otherwise, you can't bring any behavioral artistry into play, as Richard Fox likes to talk about. You can't bring artistry in if you're rigidly rule bound. The greatest artists in the world, they learned all the rules first. It's what my sister taught me. And then they learned to break the rules, but you cannot break them until you know what they are, And the problem is we tell people you can't break these ever, but they should break them. After they've served their function and they've guided them a certain way, you want them to be sensitive to real world contingencies and how things change, right? And if they're heavily rule bound, it will blind them to these contingencies. That's the problem.
I wish you said in my class today, we did a role play. We started off doing a role play, and one student role played with me, and I said to everyone, okay, this is the rule, Steph. This is what we're going to do. Every time I say bip, you clap. Every time I say doodle, you touch your head. Can you repeat that for me? Let's try it. Bip. And she does this. Doodle. And then I said to class, just take data, a plus if she got it correct, minus if she didn't. And she got like 20 out of 20 correct. And every time she did it, bip. Great job, Steph. That was a bip. Doodle. Great job, Steph. That was a doodle. I will give her immediate praise. And then I asked her, I said, honesty, close the chat. Don't open up the chat. And I'm going to tell your peers about collecting a different way of data. And I told everyone, I said, I'm going to switch the rules on her. Bip, it's now this. Doodle is now this. I basically just reverse it. But I did tell the student who was role playing with me. Mm-hmm. And we did 25 trials. I have it. She followed the same rule. She never thought to do something different, to contact the local contingent. And you can see her face being a little uncomfortable because she's like, why aren't you saying good job, Steph? Why are you not saying? Because she didn't change her behavior.
Right.
And the class was like, holy shit. And then we talked about rule govern, and we talked about how being rigid, really, we become so unsensitive to the local contingencies, and we might be following a rule and we're not really getting the outcomes that we want. And they're like, oh God, that was so amazing. And they really felt the experience. And I was like, well, class is over then. That's it. I don't need to tell you the concepts and definitions. You experience rule. It was really funny.
No, that's a really, really great way to do it. Yeah. Yeah. I like that a lot.
There's a great study. Was it Hayes and who was
Dixon?
It was like, no, it was, I want to say Hayes and Brown. It was like in the early 80s. It was in JAB, and they basically they had a human operant lab that and basically what they did is they changed the contingencies, and I think there was some sort of psychometric instrument that they gave that measured kind of rigidity or inflexibility or some such thing. And lo and behold, the folks with more rigidity were less sensitive to the changes in the schedules of reinforcement. The change over time was longer with those individuals than it was with the more flexible individuals. And so,
just real quick. Do you know, usually when people apply things like inflexible and rigid, it's usually a negative connotation. But do you know who else is rigid and inflexible? People who are uncorruptible. However, they're not called inflexible, even though they are most certainly inflexible. And the reason why they are not called inflexible is inflexible is a pejorative term. It's context-based. Your unwillingness to do something based on the context could be a virtue, not a poor quality.
Yeah, you could be principled.
You are principled. Now, the thing is, if I need you to do this is like non-compliance, and I'm glad we talked about this, because this is a Jedi mind trick that behavior analysts should know better than to fall prey to. Okay, it's the same kind of nonsense. What was the last thing that I just said? I'm sorry. Just before the Jedi mind trick, it was the words were
the inflexible.
Inflexible, yeah. The whole thing, like, you need to be inflexible sometimes. That's called principled. It's called moral, and it's called incorruptible. Okay. It's the context. So someone says, Merrill, look, dude, just see this kid in the classroom and give me some suggestions on him. Okay. And I say, because Missy Olive just taught me this today, that about the you can't consult on a kid. Well, I knew about it, but she explained it really well. You can't consult on a kid that you don't have clearance to consult on, that the parents have not given informed consent on. And this has happened to all of us. You're walking down the hallway, teacher says, Merrill, while you're here, could you go look at this kid? Okay. If I say I'd really like to, but I cannot because it is a violation of informed consent. And then, Merrill, come on, man. Why you got to be so inflexible? Am I inflexible or am I ethical and principled? See, the thing is, that's why this whole nonsense about, oh, you should be flexible. Oh, you should be in the moment. You be in the moment based on the context. If the moment sucks, you transport yourself in time to a previous moment or a moment you're looking forward to. This is what human beings do who live in time. Okay. So there are times to be in the moment and not think about the past and not think about the future. But when we don't take context into account and we give people rules like be in the moment. Oh, no. Be in the moment when? Okay. Don't be inflexible. Don't be inflexible when? See, these kind of nonsense rules like, oh, you should be flexible and you should be in the moment. I agree at times.
Yeah. You know, I think this is getting way afield from behavior plans, but I think it's an interesting thing to pursue. But I think flexible, inflexible, that's the things, concepts like impulsive and the inverse of that, I don't know if anyone out there in the conceptual behavioral world has really kind of looked at looked at those types of personality traits from a behavioral perspective. And one of the things I think about, especially with like impulsivity is something that's also seen as pejorative, right?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. If you don't have bias against the person, what would you call them instead of impulsive? Anybody. If you really like the person and thought they were awesome, how would you label them?
Creative.
Spontaneous.
Yes. Yeah, thank you.
They have a can-do attitude and they're ready to do anything and anything. Here's my point. Our biases tell us which words to choose. And when we choose those words, people dump other people in those categories. Noncompliance is one of them. That's my joke. How do you get rid of noncompliance instantly? Rename it self-advocacy. Was Rosa Parks noncompliant or was she a civil rights visionary? You make the call. Well, to the bus driver, she was noncompliant, wasn't she? Right? To other people who were being oppressed, she was a civil rights visionary. That's why noncompliance is nonsense. Rigidity and flexibility are nonsense. It's all nonsense. All that matters is the context. The context is what tells us what's going on. The rest is just a bunch of rules, and people rip the rules out of context and tell people to follow the rules regardless of the context. And then people screw up. It's
and that's when I commented saying that I hated writing behavior plans. That's a big part of it, because I find that not everybody, but a lot of,
you could say most
behavior texts get focused on the reactive portion.
Oh,
okay, what do I do? And
that's one of my pet peeves.
And I'm like, I don't even want to have that in my plan. I want to take out the what do you do when he hits himself in the head. The rest of my plan is what do you do so he doesn't hit himself in the head.
Guys, here's a fun exercise you can do for your own plan or anyone else's. You do a word search using Word. I did this on this really horrible plan. Do a word search on any word that has anything to do with learning. Words like teach, skill, acquire, maintain, generalize. Okay. Look for those words. Show, like show him how to do this, explain, demonstrate to him. And then look at all the teaching learning words: praise, show, prompt, right? Reinforce. Use those keywords like you're doing a freaking Google search, and then search the plan. Here's what you're going to find in bad plans: those words don't come up maybe once or twice, barely mentioned. Like I looked for words like teach, right? I saw it once. We're going to teach him to use his words. Which words? They were never said. Nobody ever described. What's the teaching look like? I don't know. Just teach. Everybody knows how to teach. So the word teach was in the document once. The word like behavior was there, or problem was there 87 times. Like what to do after the behavior, that took up 9 pages, like you said, Emily. Yeah. But yeah, just a simple word search. It tells you how people are thinking about how am I approaching this problem? And what you're saying is correct, Emily. Most people approach it is tell staff what to do as everything's coming down.
When the shit hits the fan, this is what you do. But I'm like, why is the shit in the air? Yeah.
Right. So tell them what to do when it's flying around, and tell them what to do when it's all over the ground afterwards. And there's like 80 pages to that. But when it comes to pull them aside for 10 minutes each day and practice this, I can't find that. So, which means somebody's not learning something, which means somebody's trying to change behavior without teaching anybody anything. And as Jim Johnston said, yes, not all behavior change means someone needs to learn a replacement behavior. Some people have funky reinforcers, as I like to talk about, or there's other issues, or it's a repertoire issue, or it's there's no reinforcement for a behavior that's already there. It's not always the replacement, but I mean, so frequently it has to be, and especially for somebody with very few skills, I'm really looking for it there. Like if it's a person with great verbal skills, very high functioning, I'm not looking for, we'll teach him to ask for a break. I'm looking for more sophisticated things, like we'll teach him how to use his problem solving skills. We're going to work on his assertiveness training, starting with asking for alternates when people tell him no. I don't see anything for people regarding any of those things. And we all know there's all kinds of skills we can teach people when they're faced with situations that upset them. We all know this. Why aren't they in the plans?
Okay, that makes me feel so good, because the current template that I'm using, even for the client I have right now, who has some pretty big self-injurious behavior, although he's little, so it's not.
It's big little behavior.
It's right. It will be a big problem later on, but because of him, I really shifted over so that now there's a very, very, very small section at the plan about what to do if he's actually hitting himself, and the rest of it, I describe kind of the evocative context for some of and I use the response class language rather than looking at individual topographies. We have the mild ones and then the more severe ones, but then I look at so for each kind of evocative situation, what are the skills that are missing from this learner's repertoire that make those things evocative? And then what are our active skill teaching targets that I have in the programming right now to address those things? And then once that's all set up, then everyone knows, the reason we're practicing this with this learner is because that's related to this situation that happens where he's missing this skill. So we're practicing this one, and they're all that way everyone can see how it's tied in. So there's not very much time in the plan spent on those other things, because we're going to teach the things that need to happen.
People are focusing on teaching their way out of things, and yours would be one of the ones that doesn't suck. And it would be just for that. I mean, for that reason, it's people are not teaching their ways out of problems in cases where, there's teaching that needs to be done. I mean, I understand there doesn't always need to be teaching done, but in like most of the cases that we're working with, some teaching needs to be done. And I don't see it in the plan. And by the way, most of the reason that these aren't bad people and they aren't lazy people, quite honestly.
Yeah, quite the opposite too. Yeah.
I think they just don't know. I used to have the same problem, and it took me a long time. And this is why I think this. I think they just don't quite know how to teach their way out of these problems. Like for me, I've spent a lot of time struggling with it. So now I'm fluent with it. And now when I look at problems, I'm immediately thinking of a million ways to teach my way out of it. And they're just so apparent to me. It's a mystery to everybody else. It is a freaking mystery. And it doesn't have to be, but I think that's one of the reasons why they're falling back on all antecedent stuff and all the post-seeded stuff, and nothing in the middle.
Right. And then Yodit was mentioning in the chat too, how the funding source has that. So actually one of the reasons that I started, that I created the template that I've been using right now is because the funder for that particular learner a few years ago, I had to do some peer reviews, and they were really trying to focus on the problem behavior. And they wanted me measuring the problem behavior and spending more time focusing on the problem behavior. And I'm like, I'm not going to count how many times he picks up a small hard object and taps his teeth, because I'll be do nothing all day. Like, we're going to figure out what to teach him instead, and we're measuring that. So I just tried to look at, okay, I'm not going to actually count the things you want me to count. Here's what I am going to count and why, and how that's directly related to the problem.
Yeah, and
did that fly with them? Did you prevail in that?
I have not had to do a peer review since. So I don't know if that's because they read my plan and they're like, this is beautiful, or if because the number of hours that I asked for didn't flag a review. So I can't tell. But the main reason I did that was for myself. So, I've been in the field a really long time, and it still can be really nerve-wracking when you're talking on the phone, especially when you're having a peer-to-peer review with someone who's not a peer and they don't speak the language. So you're also trying to translate for a non-behavior analyst why you're recommending things.
Yeah,
so for me, having it all justified so that if someone was like, well, why are you working on this? I'd already crafted it all out in my head. So then it would make it much easier for me to explain to somebody else. So... But,
it's really refreshing to hear what you've been saying, Merrill, all this, and yet not use any of the words such as PFA and SBT, because what you're saying, all this, is the kind of behavior intervention plan and the functional behavior assessment plan that are very much aligned to the outcome that you've been stressing upon. So it's really good and I think that you're right. I just review a whole bunch of sucky plans because I do school consult, and it is really bad that I can vomit on it. There's no visual display. There's arbitrary reinforcers being used. Even if they did descriptive assessment, they're not really analyzing the contingency and inform the correlations. They're breaking apart the contingency. So what the hell are you doing ABC data for if you're going to break it apart? The whole point is not to break it apart. Anyway, and none of the recommendations are really aligning to the reasons for why the problem behavior are occurring.
They're not. They don't understand.
No, it's like token economy, but it's like using token to reward for something that has nothing to do with the reasons why he's behaving that way.
This first started, and in fact, the confrontation seeking stuff that I did, that started because of a misunderstanding in function. They thought a high functioning 10-year-old who you could have a full discussion with about anything, they were going to teach him to ask for a break. And I turned to the IEP team and I said, I will give each of you $1,000 cash if this young man does not know how to say, I don't want to do this shit. Okay. Like I haven't even met him. I just read the description of him, and I can tell you he knows how to escape appropriately. That's not the problem. Right. You're thinking of a nonverbal child with autism.
Right.
That's not this child.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, it was rule following.
Some of the concerns I'm hearing, which is actually great, is that I'm hearing a lot from the field saying, okay, we want to do this new way of functional behavior assessment, and we want to do this new way of teaching. And then they're struggling to make what they're doing fit into the boxes of the insurance funders. And I said, great. Are you having a tough time fitting? And they're like, yes. I was like, great. Because what you've been doing and fitting in the boxes suck. And now you're getting to have a whole new repertoire to making outcomes. And what you used to wear don't fit any longer. Wonderful problem. Don't fit it.
Yes. Yeah.
Door.
Mic drop. Celia
I'm
Haven.
Jump in here a little bit. So I'm Selena DeVilla Shilling.
Hey, Selena.
And wonderful, extremely just fantastic conversation. But I wanted to kind of jump in on here specifically because of the mentions of some funding sources and opportunities, really to break the rules and kind of defy that rule-governed behavior. When you have supervisors or when you have those who are in a higher leadership position, informing you, this is what we do. This is why we do it. Move forward, collect your check. See you on Monday. And, I just really think the systems that are really in place right now and that have been, I just kind of wish there was a way to view the skill building, the fluency building of roles right now, or of like writing skills now, maybe to take a look at a comparison, maybe like 30 years ago when systems weren't in place, and to see kind of where clinicians were at, with some of these skills. Just because right now,
there's
from
also
what
just
I
writing
see
in general.
Yeah,
I can't tell you. I've seen them 30 years ago. They're just as bad now. And by the way, the mistakes people were making 30 years ago, they're still doing.
I guess it's kind of the way that I view this from my perspective is that, the systems that are there to guide or lead or really have someone follow, this is why you need to do it, the funding sources. And that's it. That bar is just there. There's no going beyond that. And I am not in the majority of the funding source that the field is currently in. That's not where I'm at. I really have very low desire, low motivation to go in that area. So I don't really understand that when I hear kind of problems of, we were only given 30 hours a week. Those are dream numbers that I absolutely were provided.
Yeah, it also depends. Some people use it as an excuse. Okay, for sure. Like I've been involved in cases where they say, "Well, I only get 10 hours." Like, I know what to do with this kid talking with the para for 15 minutes. I could write a plan right now, and it's going to work. I've seen 100 kids like him. So everyone doesn't need that amount of time. Sometimes what happens as well is they send in someone who is ill-prepared to deal with a complex problem. That happens too, right? And so in that case, Selena, no amount of hours will help you. You're out of your depth. That happens to a lot of people as well. So, I mean, honestly, and it's happened to me. I've had to call other people. I don't know what to do about this person. But the difference is I figure out very quickly I'm out of my depth and I tell people. The problems we have in our field is people don't know they're out of their depth, one. And the ones who do know they're out of their depth do it anyway.
Yep.
So this is, I think, the bigger problem in our field.
Or there's aversives awaiting for them if they say they're out of their depth as well. If you're working for a company and it's your job to go, fulfill these hours or do X, Y, and Z. Yeah. There are, it's
there's
the whole because contingencies,
There's business contingencies operating on business owners that absolutely positively trickle down to clinicians. And we've all seen it happening. I hear people complain about it all the time on LinkedIn. I see people writing, I think there's a post almost every day. Are you being pressured to write plans that you don't have time? And like, almost like as commercials, like it's such a problem. Places that are trying, I see Selena nodding, places are trying to entice people by saying, don't you think it sucks that you don't have enough time to do things right? Well, that people are using that as a tactic says to me that it's happening.
It's a thing. Yeah. I always read those in Troy McClure's voice from The Simpsons,
Hey, are you tired of writing plans that have no chance of helping your clients?
We'll have to put a Wikipedia link to Troy McClure in the show notes for this episode.
I'm Troy McClure. You've seen me in behavior plans such as.
Right.
I'm so happy Merrill and I aren't the only ones who understand the.
I've actually used that joke. Yeah, perhaps you've seen me in such videos as "Happy kids don't bite so hard."
Yeah, I completely agree. It's there. It's a problem. I mean, like it's to the point too where I've kind of really viewed or better examined, what it is that the title that I have, maybe when introducing people to, I just say, I'm this person in this role, and I hold a certificate that is of a level of BACB, but I don't start. I am this. like that's kind of a viewpoint that I'm kind of better examining. Like, why is this so fluently stated this way? What does this really mean? And I have a lot of respect for it. So please, I respect the entity, please. But that's just something that I'm really kind of looking at, and just how it's even so easily stated in conversations. I'm like, what does that really mean for you? What does this representation? What do you think this is? And then the second thing I wanted to mention really quick, depending upon when this is released, but it's February right now, it's Black History Month. And there was mention of Rosa Parks, and she is an incredible individual. But very quickly, before there was Rosa Parks, there was Claudette Colvin, who also took a stand in a bus. And she is one of many.
Rosa Parks was not the main one, right? She did it for the other person, right?
Yeah. So her Rosa Parks story and her situation, there was a lot that happened during that time. So it was, how do I want to say this? It was like it was a story that could be communicated on more. And I think there just was more that went on with that, but there were many, many others who took a stand before her as well. But Claudette Colvin is another individual who should be in the history books as well. So, they're amazing people.
Yeah. But it would be the same thing though. Was Claudette, was she non-compliant? Or was she a civil rights visionary? That's you use the same, but it could still be the same example. But see, I like to use the Rosa Parks example because again, most people don't know who Claudette is, and I didn't either. But anyway, but no, the way I like saying it is though, that's what bias does. Bias causes us to label the same event with different words, and we try to get other people to throw the same event in a different category. And that's what our bias does. Right? And the bias is nothing more than everything we love, hate, and fear all rolled up in one. And that's how it colors the words that we use. And that's how we use our words to try and control other people. It's the oldest Jedi mind trick in the book. It's you and I see the same thing, but I'm going to label it one way and you're going to label it another way. And we're both going to try to convince all our people to label it the way we say it should be labeled. Right. They are non-compliant. I don't know. I think this classroom kind of sucks. I think I agree with them. I think that they're just not crazy. I think that's the problem. Right.
What were we talking about on the phone the other day, Merrill, about algebra? You said something about it.
Yeah, it was something like one of the kids in a classroom. They were like, okay, stop bothering this man and go ahead and do your algebra. And the kid says, this is stupid. I'll never use it. And I go, what do you want to do when you grow up? And he goes, I want to be an auto mechanic. I go, you are absolutely right. You will totally never use it. I have a PhD. I never use it. And the kid was like, he couldn't believe I agree with him. He just went and did his algebra. But I told him, you're right. Sometimes we have to do things that are just stupid and we'll never use so that we can get other things. Algebra is one of them. And then just kind of did his algebra.
Are you guys going to be in Boston in May?
I will not.
I am.
I'm going to buy you a drink.
Oh, well, you can still do it. Just somebody else has to drink it.
All right, Matt will drink it.
There we go.
Buy me a drink. You buy. It's a Steve Martin did a joke like that in the movie My Blue Heaven. He asked for 2 double scotches from the flight attendant, and she goes, "Sir, I can only give you 2 drinks." He goes, "Well, you give me my double scotch and you put it on my tray." And he's going to have a double scotch, but could you put his double scotch on my tray? So yeah,
we'll work something out. Let's end with this. Tell us the story of the behavior plan for the little kid saying the F word. With the replacement behavior.
Oh, you mean for my friends? Oh,
yes. But don't use the F word because I don't want to bleep. I don't have to bleep it out.
That actually happened with Brian and Stacy Neff with their kids when they were much younger in the car.
Right. This is a fun story to end on, guys. This is hilarious.
Now, can I curse? Can I curse on this? Because
I would prefer you don't, because that means more work for me.
I won't. I'll just
you can say the F word. That's fine.
But anyway,
just don't say the F word.
There's like a discussion in the car about bad words, and like their little girl who's like 6 at the time goes, "Oh, mommy, I know the worst word ever." And like idiots, their parents go, "What?" And then she drops the F-bomb. And like idiots again, we all start laughing because
of course
drop the F-bomb. And then after she does it, her 4-year-old brother pipes up in the back seat he drops the F-bomb. And we really laughed because here's the rule. The younger the child is who says the F-bomb, the funnier it is. Like if you could get like an 18-month-old to say it, people would be dying for days. Okay. But anyway, so then we really started busting up. Okay. Because he dropped the F-bomb and I was like, okay, I better think quick because this is going to get out of hand. So I said this, I made up a quick lie and I said, you're right. That is a very bad word. However, it's not the worst. They didn't tell you the worst one, and I know it, but I'm not going to tell you because your parents will kill me. And they were like, please, Merrill, please tell us, big MO boost. Please tell us. No. They'll kill me. They'll kill me. I think I could go to jail if I tell this word to kids. They go, tell us. I go, okay. Shinola. And of course, instantly they say Shinola and everybody knows what to do. We all do this. Shinola, no, not that she said the Shinola word. Cars going back and forth. So anyway, and they say it again and they say it again. And the whole rest of the trip to the restaurant and back home again at Shinola, and we're screaming, never heard the F-bomb again. So, and to this day, they still say it as a joke. My daughter used the F word appropriate context with the right inflection. Yeah, that's very important. That is the bomb.
What did they say? As long as it's just
there was one there. They were doing sentence completion with a kid. They were doing interverbals and they're going like, okay, you sleep in the bed. Okay, you open the window. Right, you shut and he goes the F up, and she scored it as correct. But he said it like that. It was like so fluent. He didn't have to be prompted or anything.
Right. So, that's a case of learning the rules in order to break them. So that person was entirely flexible.
There you go.
So there's your callback for the evening. So
boom.
All right. Hey, I think that's a good place to wrap this up. This has been a hoot, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Behavioral Observations podcast with Matt Sikoria. You can find Matt's notes on this episode at www.behavioralobservations.com. We also invite you to stay connected with us on Facebook at facebook.com/behavioral observations and on Twitter at Behavior Podcast.